recess at any time. I would like to welcome everyone to this morning's hearing and the committee's first budget hearing of the fiscal year 27 cycle. Thank you to our subcommittee members and to Ambassador Greer for being here today. USTR's fiscal 27 budget request totals $95 million, an increase of 8% from fiscal 26. The budget request includes funding for increased personnel investments to enable USTR to protect national security, address unfair trade practices, and open foreign markets for U.S. goods. Your role as the President's principal trade advisor and negotiator on trade issues is vital to the success of President Trump's trade agenda. The fiscal year 27 budget request for the Office of the United States Trade Representative comes at an important time. The administration has announced trade deals with many of our key trading partners and is actively working on renegotiating the U.S.-Mexico-Canada agreement with our neighbors. Just last month, USTR also launched various Section 301 tariff investigations aimed at addressing unfair trade practices relating to forced labor and excess manufacturing capacity by over 60 nations. USTR has taken on increased focus and responsibility, and Congress has worked to meet your needs by providing targeted funding increases. USTR must ensure that rival nations like the People's Republic of China are not able to take advantage of Americans by engaging in unfair trade practices. We must also not allow China to export deadly fentanyl precursor chemicals, flooding North America and poisoning our children. I look forward to hearing how the President's budget request for USTR furthers our shared goals of responsibly managing taxpayer dollars while expanding market access for domestic producers, protecting national security, and combating unfair trade practices, particularly by geopolitical foes like China. Let me now recognize the ranking member of the subcommittee, Ms. Ming.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I join you in welcoming Ambassador Greer for his first appearance before our subcommittee. This opportunity to discuss this administration's trade policies, which have created chaos, uncertainty, and high costs for American families and businesses, is quite timely. I also look forward to hearing from you about your fiscal year 27 budget request. I support trade policies that protect American workers, consumers, and businesses from unfair trade practices, promote access to global markets, strengthen trust and collaboration with our allies, and bolster our national security. When smartly targeted and applied, tariffs can be a useful tool in our tool belt to address unfair trade practices, and Congress has provided the President with limited tariff authorities. But what we have seen from this administration has been an unlawful tariff and trade policy that is chaotic, not transparent, ripe for corruption, damaging to our closest allies, and deeply harmful to the American people and businesses it claims to protect. Tariff rates changed countless times in a single year. Policies were announced on social media and reversed just days later. American businesses were unable to make basic decisions about what to buy because the rules could change overnight. In February, the Supreme Court ruled that the International Emergency Economic Powers Act does not authorize the President to impose tariffs. That left the government owing over $166 billion, with interest growing by the millions per day, to the American businesses that paid those illegal duties. Unfortunately, the damage of the illegal tariff regime has already been felt by American families who have paid more for clothes, groceries, and other items. Businesses have faced higher material costs and retaliatory tariffs on their own exports. The administration did not come to Congress and seek lawful tariff authority. Instead, it reached for the next untested statute. Within hours of the Supreme Court ruling, the president signed a proclamation invoking Section 122 of the Trade Act of 1974 to impose a 10% global tariff. The next day, he announced on social media that the rate would increase to 15%. No formal policy has been issued. These tariffs expire this summer and are already facing legal challenges. At the same time, the administration has indicated it will pursue dozens of new investigations under Section 301 and 232 to impose yet another set of tariffs. The result for Americans has been chaos, uncertainty, and a higher cost of living. According to one independent analysis, 90% of the economic burden of tariffs fell on U.S. companies and consumers in 2025. This has resulted in an effective tax increase of nearly $1,700 on the average American household. This administration told us that the tariffs would boost American industry, but they have not. In 2025, the trade deficit in goods hit a record high, and over 80,000 manufacturing jobs were lost. After getting a boost from historic investments under the Biden administration, spending on U.S. factory construction has fallen every month since the beginning of President Trump's second term in office. In New York, those costs have hit us even harder. According to an analysis by the Manhattan Chamber of Commerce, New York households face an estimated $4,200 in additional annual costs due to tariffs. In the middle of a housing crisis, they have added around $11,000 to the cost of building each new single-family home. And in the second quarter of 2025, as tariffs ramped up, the city saw a net loss of approximately 4,900 businesses, the weakest quarter for business formation in 5 years. The state comptroller reported just weeks ago that exports to Canada, our state's most significant trading partner, declined by $3.8 billion. As the chair of the Congressional Asian Pacific American Caucus, I have been sounding the alarm on this issue since the beginning. There are more than 3 million Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander-owned small businesses across this country, and many of them rely on imports of goods that cannot be produced domestically, yet are still subject to tariffs. I have seen the impacts of these tariffs firsthand in my own district in Queens. Just last month, I led my colleagues in local and state government on a tour of Flushing, Queens, where we heard that costs for small businesses are through the roof. What makes all of this worse is the two-tiered pay-to-play system this administration has created. The wealthy and well-connected are cutting deals for themselves, while Main Street businesses like those in Flushing are left out and pay the price. Tariff exemptions and favorable rate adjustments are granted behind closed doors with no formal criteria, no application process, and no way for the public to weigh in. Meanwhile, small businesses across New York City are absorbing approximately $4.5 billion annually in added tariff costs. They don't have lobbyists in Washington to help them make their case for relief, and they shouldn't be treated as collateral damage while the president uses tariffs as leverage to reward friends and extract favors. The prices of groceries, gas, clothing, and homes are skyrocketing for American families. Small businesses have been forced to raise prices or close their doors. Construction costs are rising at a time when we desperately need much more housing construction. The chaos of an unpredictable, murky tariff regime continues. I look forward to your testimony and to what I hope is a candid discussion. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Ms. Mink. I would like now to recognize our witness, Ambassador Greer, for an opening statement. Without objection, your written statement will be entered into the record. I would ask that you keep your statement hopefully to 5 minutes so we can have additional time for questions. Gentlemen's recognized.
Thank you, Chairman Rogers and Ranking Member Mang, for having me today. I'm glad we can gather for this hearing today. I'm looking forward to our conversation. And before discussing the activities of the Office of the United States Trade Representative in detail and the resources my office needs to continue our good work in 2027, I want to make one overarching point, and that is that President Trump's trade policy is working for the American people. The U.S. goods trade deficit has decreased by 24% between April 2025, when tariffs first went into place, through February 2026, compared to the same period a year earlier. So 24% decrease. It's gone down by over 30% with China in particular, so we're diversifying away from that, which is a positive. U.S. exports reached $302 billion in January 2026 and nearly $315 billion in February 2026, the highest monthly export figures in U.S. history. So when I hear people say that somehow our exports are affected, it's for the positive. We've never exported so much from the United States as we are now. Food and agricultural exports rose by double digits in 2025. Manufacturing labor productivity registered its highest annual increase in 15 years, and manufacturing workers' wages are up by an average of $1,800. We produced more steel than Japan last year for the first time in a long time, and orders for capital equipment that go into factories are surging, all because President Trump decided to take trade seriously. And as you know and has been discussed, last April, President Trump imposed reciprocal tariffs in response to the national emergency caused by our large and persistent trade deficit of $1.2 trillion, which had increased by 40% over the previous 4 years. The result is that we had lost and continue to lose the manufacturing capacity that supports our workers, fuels U.S. innovation, and safeguards our economic and national security. And these tariffs have been instrumental in creating a level playing field for American workers and creating incentives to build, grow, and produce more in the United States at a higher wage for our workers. Last week, during a swing through the heart of American manufacturing in Michigan and Ohio, I was encouraged to see the results of a $13 billion investment by the owners of the Dodge and Jeep brands and the return of auto production lines to America from overseas. A $60 million expansion by Whirlpool, creating an additional 150 jobs in Clyde, Ohio, and highly automated facilities producing drones, tooling and dies, and solar panels. I can't account for New York State policies and taxes that drive away business because all of these other developments are being spurred by President Trump's tariffs. And alongside the tariff program, the President has also secured deals with numerous trading partners to address the unfair practices that contributed to our trade deficit. And these new trade deals cover over half the world's population. We have 9 agreements on reciprocal trade with countries like Malaysia, Cambodia, El Salvador, Guatemala, Argentina, Bangladesh, Taiwan, Indonesia, and Ecuador. And they represent real, meaningful new market access for American exports, the kind that American farmers and manufacturers were promised that the World Trade Organization would achieve, but did not. We've also inked deals with the United Kingdom, the European Union, Japan, Japan, and South Korea. And we're looking forward to finalize even more deals in the weeks and months ahead. And these agreements have achieved long-standing U.S. trade priorities, many that have festered for decades, including the lowering of foreign tariffs on most U.S. exports and elimination of unfair non-tariff barriers. For example, 8 countries have exempted American meat and cheese products from geographical indication rules that prevented the use of common marketing terms. 11 countries have agreed to accept U.S. automotive emission and safety standards. 9 countries have agreed to accept U.S. FDA approvals for new treatment and medicines. We've also received strong commitments from our trading partners to enhance intellectual property protection, provide a level playing field for U.S. companies with respect to their domestic labor and environmental protection standards, and improve coordination on economic security. The President's trade program continues despite the Supreme Court's decision in February. Within hours, the President reimposed tariffs using Section 122, and a few weeks ago, we signed another agreement on reciprocal trade with Ecuador. So the program continues. And as we continue to address our trading partners' unfair practices, we are using our investigatory powers granted to us by Congress to investigate forced labor in other countries and structural excess capacity that lead to global imbalances. In President Trump's first term, this tool, Section 301, was used to great effect to establish a stable and durable approach to trade that has received bipartisan support. As you know, the Section 301 tariffs on China for forced technology are still in effect today. Not only did President Biden keep those tariffs in place, but he even expanded them, showing bipartisan support for this tool. So with all of this new work, USTR needs to have the resources to meet the need. The USTR team is dedicated to helping American blue-collar workers, American farmers, and families in the communities they support. But we can only meet those obligations we have to Americans if we have the resources that we need. Whether it's negotiating new agreements or enforcing agreements, we need to be able to have the personnel to do that. Last year, this committee heard our call for more resources and generously increased USTR's appropriation, and we're spending that money now to hire new negotiators, economists, attorneys, and other subject matter experts. And these help strengthen the agency for the benefit of the American people. And so this year, President Trump has requested that USTR's budget be increased to $95 million, a $7 million total increase over FY 2026. And this will enable us to do the hiring we need to secure a level playing field, secure new market access for American farmers and workers, reindustrialize our country, and fully achieve all the wins we've gained through our agreements on reciprocal trade. And I think our shared interest in doing what's best for America should allow us to continue to meaningfully collaborate as we work together, and I approach this hearing in that spirit. Thank you for your consideration of the President's budget request, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Ambassador Greer. We will now proceed under the 5-minute rule for questions. I'll begin by recognizing myself. President Trump has made trade one of his core policies during his second term in office, and you and your office are very busy carrying out this strategically important agenda. As a result, Congress provided a funding increase of $14 million in fiscal 26 to match this increase in workload. Please share with us today why USTR requested an additional $7 million in fiscal 27.
Thank you, Chairman. I want to express again gratitude for the committee for extending our appropriation last year. We are finally now, after having many employees who left the agency during the Biden administration, we're finally getting up to full strength. But over the last year, we concluded 9 additional trade agreements. That's the most we've ever done in a single year at USTR. And what's important to us going forward is to be able not only to conclude more agreements, but to be able to enforce these agreements. And these agreements are very important because they open up markets overseas. We have countries that have lowered their tariffs for us. We've been asking for decades. They finally have done it. But on top of that, we have countries who have made commitments on forced labor, environmental regulation, intellectual property, non-tariff barriers. And if we don't have the personnel to monitor and enforce these agreements, we will not fully realize all of the benefits. We're at the beginning of a real resurgence in exports and manufacturing, and we want to make sure we have the personnel to deliver for the American people.
Ambassador, as you know, the growing economic and technological threat posed by the Chinese Communist Party is a bipartisan concern. Can you explain how the USTR budget request strengthens the nation's ability to counter China's unfair trade practices?
Certainly. So with respect to China, we expect that with these additional funds, a portion of that will go to ensuring we have appropriate staff in our policy team who know these issues with respect to China. Their economy is different than ours. They use extreme subsidies. They control their private sector in a way we don't. They use measures. They constantly issue new measures, and we need to be able to have the resources to understand those measures and respond to them. We would also use this funding for enforcement resources. So as we're working with the Chinese, we're trying to have a constructive relationship with them, and we want to be able to trade in non-sensitive areas with them in a balanced way. But we also need to make sure that we have enforcement available where if the Chinese violate any deals we make or take other unfair trade practices or engage in other unfair trade practices, we have the negotiators, the subject matter experts, the economists, and the attorneys we need to conduct investigations and make sure that we're defending American interests.
How do you expect to advance the administration's efforts to counter China during President Trump's meeting with the Chinese president next month?
So about 1 month ago, I, with the Secretary of the Treasury, met with our counterparts to discuss outcomes for the meetings with President Xi and President Trump next month. We expect that that meeting will go smoothly. We expect that we will prolong stability in our trade and economic relationship with the Chinese. On the one hand, we want to make sure we can continue to receive the rare earth minerals that most of the world is dependent upon China for. And at the same time, we also want to be able to ensure that the Chinese are buying things from us that Americans are good at making. This means agricultural products, it means airplanes, it means medical devices. There are certain things we're fine to import from China as well. And so we want to have an outcome geared toward having balanced trade with China and a managed trade relationship with them to avoid surprises, avoid escalation, and ensure that the trading relationship is for the benefit of Americans.
Ambassador Greer, China has long supplied the precursor chemicals that are used to produce fentanyl that ends up in the United States and killing tens of thousands of our young people. What is USTR doing to ensure that China stops supplying these chemicals that are killing Americans?
Well, last year, the president imposed tariffs on China to stop these chemicals. And of course, we had a partisan view where others tried to remove this and eliminate this leverage against the Chinese. All that being said, whenever we speak with the Chinese, we bring staff with us from the National Security Council and other agencies to engage with the Chinese and ask them to control not only fentanyl, but the precursor drugs. And if we have information available on specific companies or shipments, we'll share that with the Chinese. And so there is incremental progress. Fortunately, we've had fentanyl deaths decline over the past year, which is good, but there's a lot more to be done. And certainly the Chinese have a lot more they can do on that front.
Late last year, the U.S. closed the so-called de minimis loophole that allowed shipments of low dollar value to enter the U.S. with minimal inspection. How has closing the de minimis loophole helped combat the importation of these precursor chemicals?
So we have found in the past that other countries, China, Mexico, and others have used the loophole under de minimis, which typically has very little scrutiny at the border, to send shipments of fentanyl and precursor drugs, and also counterfeit goods and other dangerous goods that aren't certified or regulated. So closing down the de minimis loophole has been very important for that. We're continuing to analyze that and monitor that, but we think it's been a very positive development.
How is USTR and the Trump administration ensuring that China is following through and that these efforts are working to stop the flow of fentanyl into our country?
Well, again, Chairman, whenever we meet with the Chinese, which we do so regularly, both at my level and at staff and deputy levels, we raise this issue and we assess their progress on controlling items. And they have, in fact, controlled additional fentanyl precursors, and we've seen action on that front. There is much more to be done. And we're happy to have and use leverage with authorities. If Congress wants to give us additional authorities on tariffs to combat fentanyl, we're happy to take that and use it. It's been opposed by others in Congress, but we will continue to raise it with the Chinese to fight this battle.
Will that be on the agenda when the president goes to China?
It will be, yes, sir.
Thank you. Ms. Meng.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Ambassador, this administration initially said that there would be no exceptions to these tariffs, but has since issued a long list of exceptions across multiple executive orders and annexes with no formal public process. Even without a formal exclusion process through which companies can request tariff exclusions for certain products, it looks like the administration has effectively granted tariff exclusions for certain products, companies, and categories. I was wondering if there was ever a formal notice or public comment period for any of these exclusion decisions.
So, Ranking Member, thank you. So, at the beginning of this term, when the president sought to impose tariffs, he made a decision that he did not want to have broad exclusion and exemption programs. He felt it it undermined the program to some degree. And so to the extent that the President has adjusted product coverage from time to time, it's been in response to analyses done by economists within the administration. One example is last November, after concluding negotiations with many countries, the President decided that he should remove tariffs from certain goods that either cannot be naturally grown here, things like bananas or coffee, or things that can't naturally be extracted here. He also made a decision that certain items that might be covered by a later in Section 232 investigation, which is a different tariff authority controlled by the Commerce Department, that those should be separate issues, and so they shouldn't necessarily be part of the reciprocal tariff program. So to the extent that the coverage was adjusted, it was for kind of broad-based principles like that, things we literally can't grow or extract from the ground, or things that are going to be covered by other tariff programs.
Thank you for that. Do you think that there should have, and I hear that, do you think that there should have been a more public or formal process for stakeholders, people in the industry, businesses and industries that would directly be impacted?
So we have had, hundreds, if not thousands, of meetings with stakeholders who have an interest, and certainly I take your point. A big company with lobbyists, they have more resources to come in and talk about it. We also talk to trade associations who represent a broader group, and we do talk to small businesses, and often we talk to congressional offices where small businesses feel like they have a larger voice. With the Section 301 investigations we're doing, these do in fact have, by law, a public process. And so we just closed yesterday our comment process that was very public. Federal Register notice went out. Everyone had weeks. And so now everyone in my office is going to start going through these. There will be further Federal Register notices out there where folks can comment. So I agree. I think it's a great policy to have.
No, I appreciate your comments about the 301 process. I was asking more specifically about the IEPA and now Section 122. And if you have information or records on data and some of the trends of the conversations that the administration has had with stakeholders, it would be really helpful. I think a lot of us, and I can speak for both sides of the aisle, I think are concerned about a lot of our small businesses, small manufacturers that are seeing their cost spike and deciding, do they eat the cost or do they put it onto the customers, our consumers, our constituents, because of these global tariffs under the IEPA part and now Section 122. But I just want to make the case to the government that a product, if someone wants to make a case to the government that a product that is critical to their business should be excluded, what process would a small business or manufacturer in our district undergo?
So right now, with respect to Section 122, that legal authority has a fairly narrow authority with respect to exceptions. It gives the president a lot of discretion within that, which is fortunate. But the idea is it's for a global tariff. We've imposed a global tariff there. With Section 301, which my office runs, and Section 232, which the Commerce Department runs, both of those processes have Federal Register notices opportunities. And I've been encouraging people who have a view on product coverage for tariffs to comment, to put in their comments. There's both a public comment process. If they're concerned about confidentiality, there's a way to bracket and provide confidential information as well. So we're trying to make it as simple as possible for anyone in the country who wants to comment. They can do so. They can do it confidentially. They can do it publicly. They can do it through a lobbyist or just themselves and send a letter.
Yeah, and again, I'm just looking out for our small businesses and our manufacturers who for, almost a whole year were paying these IEPA tariffs with no way to seek relief. They don't have fancy lobbyists in Washington advocating for their concerns and the high costs that either them or our constituents and American families were impacted by. And look, I just, has the administration considered simply sending Congress a proposal requesting tariff authority that it wants through a normal legislative process?
So far, Ranking Member, the President has used tariff authorities provided by Congress. So those are in place. I know that there have been many bills proposed by different members of the House, included that would actually impose a global tariff and higher tariffs on countries that pose a bigger problem. We would be supportive of many of those. So there are proposals out there. We're happy to talk to anybody and everybody about them. I know Congresswoman Van Dyne has something. Representative Golden from the Democratic side had something. These are things where I think we would be supportive. We're happy to discuss them.
Sorry, I'll yield back.
Mr. Strong.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Chairman Rogers, Ranking Member Ming for holding this important hearing. Ambassador Greer, it's great to be with you again, and I thank you for being here today and for your work in advancing a trade agenda that puts American workers and businesses first. America is back. My district in Alabama's 5th District is home to over 400 companies working on advanced technologies tied to national defense, space, and homeland security, along with a large agriculture presence. Ambassador Greer, can you speak to what USTR is doing to strengthen export control enforcement?
Certainly, and I'm always glad to hear the list of industries you have in your district, because it matches up really well with a lot of the foreign market access that we're getting in our trade agreements, and so that's why we've seen record numbers of exports here in the United States. With respect to export control enforcement, operationally that's part of the Commerce Department. I know they're very diligently working at that. In our agreements that we are carrying out, we are asking our trading partners for the first time in any trade agreement to align with us on export controls and export control enforcement. Our view is that if you're going to trade favorably with the United States, you should also take our economic and national security concerns into account. And so we are having a lot of commitments from our trading partners that they will respect our export controls.
Thank you. What additional personnel, resources, or authorities would help ensure that the rules we put in place are being enforced effectively on the ground?
Well, in terms of resources, the President's budget proposal for USTR gets at that to some degree. We've asked for an additional $7 million, with the vast bulk of that just going to salaries for new civil servants to supplement the folks I have now who are working really hard to enforce these agreements. So that would be very helpful. In terms of other authorities, some of which I just mentioned to the ranking member, there are members of Congress who have suggested implementing a 10% border adjustment tax or something like that, or having higher taxes based on a country's trade surplus with us. I welcome those kinds of things. I think that can help us get the deficit down, reshore manufacturing, and allow enforcement.
Thank you. Ambassador Greer, in North Alabama, many small businesses are playing a critical role in supporting larger manufacturing and supply chains that are eager to continue growing and investing here at home. Can you share how USTR is working to provide greater clarity around tariff and trade policies so small businesses in North Alabama have the confidence they need to plan, invest, and expand?
Certainly. So first and foremost, as the President has said frequently, if you build in America and you source from America, you don't pay a tariff in America. Our most important free trade agreement is the Constitution of the United States, and that's why we're so competitive. And that's why trade actually only makes up about 20% of American GDP. For most countries, it's more than 50%. So our market is the most important. Now, obviously, we're going to import, and we want to be able to have supply chains that are secure and resilient. We have made a series of deals over the past years with countries making up over half the world's population, and those deals have specific tariff rates, and we intend to hold to those deals. We have been focused on continuity for the tariff rates. Tools may change, legal tools may change, but the policy remains the same. And I think with respect to Section 232, which is not in my wheelhouse, it's the Commerce Department, they've been fairly consistent. They occasionally adjust their tariff rates to respond to stakeholder concerns or to compliance concerns and things like that. So we are maintaining the trade policy, and we want to have continuity for the reasons you described.
Thank you. North Alabama farmers, along with farmers across this country, continue to face low commodity prices while competing against heavily subsidized foreign producers. Cotton prices today are approximately the same price per pound as they were in the 1970s under President Jimmy Carter. We need to stop importing foreign cotton from other countries. Ambassador Greer, what actions is USTR taking to expand market access for American agriculture and push back against countries that impose unfair barriers on U.S. beef, poultry, and row crop?
I would give, I've mentioned the agreements on reciprocal trade we've concluded over the past year a few times. I'd give Indonesia as an example. This is the fourth largest country in the world by population. Yep. And for the past few years, they put all kinds of barriers to our ag, and we had an ag trade deficit with Indonesia. We have now required them to remove their tariffs and non-tariff barriers on ag, and we're starting to see that go the other way.
Thank you. In my last 15 seconds, I want to commend you for your efforts to stop this import and bringing in of fentanyl to kill a generation of Americans. You look at fentanyl poisonings, they're down by more than 54% since this administration took office. You deserve a lot of credit for that. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Dr. Jolly, we're pleased to welcome to the hearing the ranking member of the full committee, Mr. Lowe.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and the ranking member. This is, I think, the fourth hearing this morning, so it's kind of, I appreciate the opportunity to be here. And I want to say welcome to you, Ambassador Greer. It's great to see you again. And I thank you for being here and engaging with us. On the campaign trail in office, President Trump made a lot of promises about trade policy, about putting more money in our pockets, create millions and millions of new manufacturing jobs. It was the most pro-American manufacturing and jobs policy, jobs in factories. This is all quotes. Jobs in factories will come roaring back into our country. There's a reality here, which is different. The tariffs have exacerbated the cost of living crisis. American families paid more than $1,700 each in tariff costs last year. Things are only getting worse as the war of choice with Iran continues to drive up the cost of gas, groceries, everyday goods. Question of manufacturing and jobs. U.S. trade deficit in manufactured goods was $62 billion higher in 2025 compared to 2024. Not exactly the manufacturing renaissance that was promised. So, Ambassador Greer, how many manufacturing jobs do you know that the United States lost per day during the president's first year in office?
So the last 2 years of the Biden administration, 230,000 manufacturing jobs were lost. In the first quarter of this year, we have net positive on manufacturing jobs. After 40 years of offshoring, it takes more than 1 year to get them all back.
Well, but let me just tell you what the Bureau of Labor Statistics has said, okay? I just said U.S. manufacturing lost more than 100 jobs per day from February 2025 to February 2026. That's more than 88,000 in total. Not a trade policy that delivers for working people. So let me, if I can, move on. And another reason for the decline in manufacturing is that incentives, you spoke about offshoring, the incentives for offshoring in our trade deals continue to operate. The USMCA, which we both worked on together, the president touted this as this was incredible, was the most important, quote, most important trade deal that we've made so far. Since USMCA entered into force, offshoring has continued. Agricultural equipment, automobiles, dishwashers, tires, companies across the country are moving, threatening to move production to Mexico to take advantage of USMCA's rules and Mexico's relatively lower wages and labor productions. Mexican manufacturing wages remain roughly 40% lower than their Chinese counterparts, 88% lower than those in the United States. I believe you and I agree on USMCA that it's not just a review, that there needs to be a renegotiation. You've indicated that while not every issue with USMCA will be resolved by July 1, ongoing discussions with Mexico and the discussions with Canada will focus on priority issues. So what issues are you prioritizing for discussion with those countries? What are the top items for discussion, the sticking points? And what about closing the loopholes that incentivize offshoring or allow China to take advantage of the deal's benefits it must be at the top of your list. But let's talk about your priorities.
It is, and I agree with you, Representative DeLore. I think you and I are aligned on so many of these issues, and the president is, right? The president is very focused on outcomes, and when we did USMCA, which we did together, we were excited about a lot of things. We've done the rapid response mechanism, which we have continued
It was
to
a
use.
floor and not a ceiling, and rapid response was critical.
That's right, and we've continued to use it, but we look at outcomes, and the outcomes, indeed, there's continued offshoring toward Mexico. I'm going to Mexico next week, and I'm going to speak with my counterpart, and I have already told him, and we've already had conversations about changing the rules of origin, which is kind of a granular topic,
do, right.
but this is how we avoid the transshipment through Mexico, and it's how we make it tougher. And I will say, it's also important for us to have a tariff level that incentivizes compliance with those tougher rules. Because if our outside tariff level is low, people will just say, well, I don't care about the rules, I'll just bring something in from Vietnam. That's why I'm trying to have higher tariffs on the rest of the world so that I can actually incentivize manufacturing in the U.S.
Well, look, I just say overall, and you won't agree, I believe that the president's trade policy is worse than the cost of living crisis. We've raised prices. We've not fulfilled the promises on jobs and manufacturing that he promised in the first days in office. There's an opportunity, to turn that around, including, again, through the USMCA renegotiation. I'm looking forward to staying in touch on that process and looking at what are the kinds of incentives that or proposals that we can make in order to look at how we can renegotiate this and make it work and have it be a worker-centric trade agreement, which is where our trade agreements should be. I thank you, and I thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank the gentlelady. We have a series of votes on the floor, which will require us to recess the hearing until the last vote in the series of votes on the floor. So the subcommittee will now stand in recess, subject to the call of the chair. The plan will be to reconvene after the last floor vote in the series. We will proceed with questions from Mr. Alford.
Thank you, Dean, and Ranking Member Meng, thank you so much for holding this important hearing. U.S. Trade Representatives' work has real consequences for America's farmers, our manufacturers, and small businesses. A strong pro-America trade agenda like this administration's focuses on strict enforcement and better deals, helps our producers compete globally, and strengthens our supply chains here at home. In Missouri's 4th Congressional District, we see the benefits of the president's pro-America trade policies each and every day. When our beef, pork, soybeans, manufactured goods, and small business exports face unfair barriers or delayed access, the impact hits our communities immediately. We need USTR fully engaged in breaking down those barriers, enforcing commitments, and expanding opportunities abroad. Today, I want to understand how this budget request supports stronger trade enforcement, faster market opening efforts, and a more resilient supply chain for American industry. This committee expects transparency with clear priorities, measurable results, and consistent communications with Congress. What I hope to learn today is how USTR plans to deliver for American workers, farmers, manufacturers, and small businesses. Ambassador, thank you for being here today. I really want to focus on the ag sector, in particular in Missouri. It's home to more than 80,000 farms, the second highest number of farms of any state in the nation, second to Texas. We have 16,000 farms in my district alone. Our farmers, producers, and rural manufacturers continue to face significant pressure from rising input costs. And I want to make this clear, I don't like looking in the rearview mirror all the time, but a lot of those input costs were due to the war on fossil fuels from the previous administration. Farmers are trying to catch up. Demand continues to soar. How is USTR prioritizing trade actions that directly impact the cost and availability of key ag inputs such as fertilizers, chemicals, and feedstocks?
Thank you, Congressman. And we're, again, always glad to hear about the robust agricultural activity. We've been, as you know, we've been opening markets around the world, and we're cutting down that ag trade deficit that grew up during the Biden administration. When it comes to the input costs, we think about things like fertilizer, right? Just yesterday, I was in a meeting with Secretary Rollins, Secretary Lutnick, and a handful of others, and we met with folks all along the supply chain, fertilizer manufacturers, traders, state ag commissioners, et cetera, to talk about this very issue. The president's quite focused on it. On the one hand, the good news is we have a lot of domestic production of fertilizer right here in the United States. There are certain elements like potash that comes in from Canada. We don't have a lot of potash here. That was never subject to any kind of tariff or anything like that. Our sense is that the trade policy is a long-term policy. It's about reshoring. It's about manufacturing. But there are certain markets where we just don't get involved. Oil and gas, certain hydrocarbons. LNG. It's at the heart of some fertilizer manufacturing. Potash, we don't have tariffs. Other fertilizer, we don't have tariffs on that.
China continues to dominate key supply chains for inputs like fertilizers, feedstock, and industrial components. How is USTR using tariff tools and trade enforcement to reduce U.S. dependency on China and strengthen domestic production?
Yeah, thank you. So as in my opening comments, I mentioned that the president's tariff program, again, which it really extends back to his first term when he first imposed tariffs on China. President Biden kept them in place. Our trade deficit in goods with China, manufactured goods and everything else, it went down by $130 billion last year. In 1 year, that's a pretty incredible decrease. And at the same time, it was going down with other countries too. So we pay attention to transshipment and all that, but overall, we're going in the right direction. We're diversifying from China, and we're supporting domestic manufacturing and protecting with tariffs where we need to.
How much stronger are we now than we were 2 years ago when it comes to trade in general? I know some small business owners, this de minimis, doing away with that has impacted their business. But overall, the American economy, how much better off are we?
Well, first of all, we've had wages go up. So when we think about trade, we think about exports, and I've already mentioned today, January and February of this year were the highest exports in U.S. history, over $300 billion each month. So we're winning on that front. Wages, especially manufacturing wages, went up by 5% last year. And this is for non-supervisory. This is for people on the line working. We've seen manufacturing productivity go up. And in the first quarter of this year, we saw manufacturing jobs be positive in the quarter for the first time since 2023. So all of those trends are going in the right direction.
Thank you, Ambassador, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Mr. Ivey?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Ranking Member. Ambassador, thank you for being here today. I want to ask you about IEEPA tariffs in the wake of the Learning Resources decision by the Supreme Court. The issue seems to be that I think 166 billion or so was collected with respect to the tariffs, and after the court declared them illegal, that the issue became, well, how will the money be refunded to the people who paid the tariffs? And there's sort of two sets of issues that I wanted to touch on. One in particular is what happens to regular people who paid money in the form of higher costs or higher prices. Is there some kind of process that's going to be put in place or that is in place for them to get a refund? The Department of Homeland Security, I guess it was CBP put in a program that starts on Monday, and that's, I think it's called CAPE, and the idea there is that entities that are the importer of record or the licensed customs broker can file a request with respect to the entity or the department and seek a declaration for repayment. And I think about 2,000 companies or so have sought that already. And there's going to be a process where they can try and recover the funds that they put in. I haven't seen what's going to happen with respect to regular people. And as you move down the supply chain, as smaller businesses, I'm going to focus on individual customers here, but smaller businesses are facing sort of similar issues too. Some in my district have raised this with me. So is there going to be a process in place, or is there one already that will help to make sure that people at the other end of the supply chain, not just the big corporations and the like at the front end of it, but the regular people are going to have a chance to get some sort of refund for money they paid in the form of the tariffs that the Supreme Court said are now illegal?
Sure, thanks, Congressman. So again, the tariffs were imposed to protect American jobs and reverse the offshoring that happened for decades. This money was in the general treasury. It was the taxpayers' money that was brought in. It was assessed on foreign goods made by foreign workers who work for foreign companies. That's where the money came from. And then we had a bunch of Democrat attorneys general who sued. And in their suit, Congressman, this is relevant because they asked for the money just to go back to the companies. So the Democrat attorneys general asked for this, and they're getting what they asked for. They could have asked for equitable relief. They could have asked for all kinds of things. They're getting exactly what they asked for. CBP has set up a program, like you mentioned, and they'll send the money back to the people who paid it.
If I might, I appreciate that comment, but during the course of the federal litigation, the Trump administration stated that if the tariffs were found to be illegal, they would refund the money. So there was stipulations made in multiple cases as this litigation rose up by the administration for the repayment. So what I'm not seeing, though, is a way to get the money back to, as I stated in the predicate to the question, whether it's smaller businesses on the supply chain or regular customers. And I'll add this too, even if it's the case that state AGs only ask for that particular remedy, that doesn't block the administration from trying to find ways to refund the money for people. So, for example, you guys got a letter from Governor Pritzker, and he proposed $1,700 liquidated damage amount. He only spoke about the people of Illinois, but that's one possibility. There's two bills that are pending here in the House now, Mr. Cuellar, Ms. Crockett. The Crockett bill proposes the administration putting together a process to, through the Department of Treasury for repayment. Mr. Cuellar does something roughly similar, but his would focus more on targeting lower income people who made the payment. So I think there's a cutoff at $400,000. I'm not wedded to any of those. I'm agnostic on it, but I guess the question is the administration going to do anything to make sure that regular people who paid higher prices are going to get some money back? Because if you don't, what will happen is the corporations are going to get sort of double compensation, which I think is an unjust enrichment. They'll get the benefit of having charged the higher prices at the front end, and they'll get the benefit of the refund through the process that you all have set up. So is there anything that's going to be done by the administration to try and address that?
See, I'm short on time here. The one thing I'd say is Governor Pritzker's attorney general asked for the money to go to the corporations, so he gets what he lays in the bed that he made. We have asked companies that they should give, if they get a refund, they should give it to their workers as bonuses. It was money in the general treasury. It was going toward the reindustrialization of America, and the Democrat attorneys general said, no, we want it to go back to the companies who import foreign goods made by foreign workers. Like, that's the law.
I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Mr. Klein.
Thank you, Mr. Greer, for being here. I want to talk about apples, and then Korea, and if we got time, EU. U.S. apple growers spent 2 decades of time and money to develop a year-round apple market in India. In 2018, U.S. apples were 53% of the apples imported to India. India's 50% tariff on apples has greatly hindered U.S. growers' efforts to rebuild the market after several years of retaliation. U.S. apples are now only 8.5% of imports. Apples from Iran, Turkey, and Afghanistan are nearly 50%. Competitors in New Zealand and the EU will soon enjoy preferential treatment under trade agreements with India and further chisel away the market U.S. growers built. U.S. apple growers need a better deal. The references to India reducing tariffs for U.S. agricultural products in the framework agreement announced in February was positive. As an agreement on reciprocal trade is finalized with India, how is USTR securing significant tariff reductions for U.S. apples?
Thank you. So we've been working with the Indians for over a year. We have an initial joint statement, general terms of agreement with India. I met with their ambassador this week as well to try to bring that agreement to a conclusion. We have discussed apples many times. I've personally raised it at my level, so certainly our staff talk about it, but I've personally raised it with my counterpart. This is something that they're considering. Nothing's done till it's done in these negotiations, but something that we've made a priority. We want to be able to make sure that our to the extent India is going to be importing apples, we want to be able to play in that space. We're not trying to undercut, Indian apple industry or anything like that, but if they're going to import it, they should be importing it from America too.
Agreed. Moving on, the 2026 National Trade Estimate Report identified Korea's digital trade policies, including the KFTC's enforcement campaign and the Fairness Act, as significant barriers to U.S. companies. Research by the Competier Foundation estimates that Korea's policies could cost the U.S. economy $525 billion over the next decade, with American households losing nearly $4,000 each. What specific enforcement mechanisms is USTR using to hold Korea to its commitments under the joint fact sheet? And as you know, the Korean government continues its transparent discrimination against U.S. digital companies. At what point does continued Korean defiance trigger formal trade actions?
Thank you. As you know, we have a joint fact sheet with Korea where they specifically agreed and committed not to use these types of laws or rules on a discriminatory basis. And so this is something where we're holding their feet to the fire. We have tools. Section 301 is a tool that I've talked about today, and some of you have discussed. This is something we can use if we need to. Again, I've had conversations with my counterpart in Korea. I've spoken with the Prime Minister of Korea about this issue. I know there are a lot of views domestically about big tech companies and regulation and that kind of thing. What I want is a situation where Congress gets to decide how American tech companies are controlled and not foreign jurisdictions. So we are very attentive to any suggestion of discrimination by foreign countries against our
You
companies.
need to be leaning on them pretty hard. Their proposed Fairness Act sets market thresholds that Chinese platforms like TikTok, Temu, and Alibaba fall below, effectively exempting them from the regulations entirely, while American companies are bearing the full weight of the fines and operational mandates. To put it in perspective, while just a quick glimpse at the new 1260H list of Chinese military companies included some of these firms like Alibaba, does the administration view Korea's discriminatory treatment as a national security concern? And if so, is that concern being incorporated into how you're approaching enforcement?
So if they were to follow through with this and apply these laws in a discriminatory way, we would take action. Until now, they have been willing
Proposing exactly that.
to speak to us and negotiate with us because we are concerned about this. And we are prepared to take action if we need to, because it's not like there's some other company waiting to step into the wings other than some of these Chinese companies you're talking about.
The EU is another area where we see discriminatory action being taken against U.S. companies. The Digital Markets Act, Digital Networks Act, Cloud and AI Development Act, Digital Services Taxes, EU Space Act, other policies, all of which disproportionately target U.S. companies. How does your budget prioritize comprehensive action against this entire suite of discriminatory measures, and what enforcement mechanisms will USTR deploy to protect American technology leadership against European regulatory overreach?
So we have an office dedicated to services investment, and this is an office where we have been going through and inventorying all of these unfair and discriminatory laws and practices that you're talking about. If I'm to take action on these, again, I keep saying Section 301. Every time I say Section 301, you have to think that's a policy person, that's one or two lawyers, that's a political person in the front office. Every time I say 301, that's more people. I'm happy to do it, but I do have to have the resources to hire those people.
Thank you. Yield back.
Mrs. Dean?
Thank you, Chairman Rogers. Thank you, Ranking Member Mang. And thank you, Ambassador, for being here today in front of us. I'm Madeline Dean. I serve on both the Appropriations and the Foreign Affairs Committees, and I am co-founder of the Fentanyl Prevention Caucus. And so I know that you play a very pivotal role in economic policies, including tariffs, which we are talking a lot about today. So first, let me say something that I agree with the President on, and I congratulate the President for doing, which is eliminating the de minimis loophole. I say that because eliminating the de minimis loophole is good for U.S. businesses, it is good for individual consumers, and of course, it is good in the fight against the transport of fentanyl. So thank the President for that. I have said it openly before. Ambassador Greer, I read with interest in your testimony, quote, "Our most important trade agreement is our Constitution." Yet a few paragraphs later, you state, "The President's trade program continues despite the Supreme Court's decision in February relating to IEEPA tariffs." That's puzzling to me. That's ironic. It's a paradox. You ground your work, trade work, in our Constitution. You emphasize that that is what the administration relies upon. And yet, the Supreme Court found the President's tariffs to be unconstitutional, to be illegal. So I want to say to you, I want you to live up to the order that the Supreme Court said. The monies must be returned to those who paid them. You'll see some difference of opinion here, but it's very clear the monies were illegally gotten by this government, by this administration. They are illegally sitting in Treasury, and they need to go back to those who paid them in full with interest. So let me examine that with you. I noted that you spoke a lot about trade deficits, trade surplus. We heard the President do all of that. Reminds me of the last time we had a trade surplus, as you well know, was in the Great Depression. To say the least, that's not a good thing. It was in part as a result of isolationist policies of the 1920s. I'd hate to have history repeat itself. The administration stole from American businesses and consumers in an illegal way with the tariffs. The money must be returned. Will you commit to making sure the money is returned in full without request from those who it was taken from, automatically to those from whom it was taken? Will you commit to work with Treasury, Customs and Border to return in full automatically? Yes or no?
So,
Yes or no?
Congresswoman, anything the court tells us to do, we'll do it, right? And so
Are you going to hide behind the court didn't speak to, we have to return the money or not?
So as I was just speaking with Mr. Ivey, Customs and Border Protection has a program, right? We don't just do a willy-nilly grab and just anyone comes and we give them money. They come in through the CBP program that's set up. It's a portal. It opens on Monday.
I want to interrupt you.
They-
Stop me, because I'm aware of the program.
Well, that's how we give the money back.
No? Here's how
Yes.
you collected the money. I took a look at this. This is an entry summary for an importer, a small importer.
The form 7501. I'm very familiar with
I
it.
think you're right.
Of course
You're
I'm right.
It is very good. Then you know on 7501, IEEPA tariffs are listed here as clear as day to the penny, to the product and to the penny. There should be no application process. Return, hit the button, return it to those who paid it. Will you commit to saying that the program needs to be changed? It should be automatic. Yes or no? Will you commit to that?
Well, I don't control Customs, so
Would you
I
commit
can't
to
commit
that?
on
You're
behalf
part-
of Customs. No, I
Would you-
can't commit on
As
behalf
part
of
of the administration and as the ambassador of trade? Yes or no?
So there's a manufacturer ID number on that form, and if you take that
So
and
you
you go to
don't
the
want it-
portal and you
you don't
put it
want-
in, and you tell them, I'm the manufacturer, CBP can
I'm
look
going to
at it
reclaim my time.
and verify.
Reclaiming my time.
I mean, this is just
In
normal
terms
process.
of paying interest on these monies wrongly, illegally, unconstitutionally gotten by this administration, interest is owed on it. Do you agree with that?
If there's interest owed on by statute, it gets paid. That's right.
If there is interest, or is there interest?
I'll defer to CBP. I don't have the specific.
Do you know what the interest rate is?
I think it's 6%.
I don't think that's true.
Okay, what is it?
I think it's 4.5. I'll take 6.
Oh, 4 per 5 is better.
I'll take 6 since it was illegally gotten.
I'll ask
But the
CBP.
IRS corporate overpayment rate is 4.5, so we can check on that.
We'll do 4.5.
Oh, you know what? No, you're right. You're right. Overpayments
Again? I'm right again.
exceeding $10,000 go to 6%. You're absolutely right. I missed that. Will you commit to making sure that interest is paid on all of these refunds, which should be automatic?
If there is an issue with this, or your constituent has an issue with this, I'm happy to talk to CBP about it.
We shouldn't have to do it by
Time of the
constituent.
gentlelady has expired.
May I just say, for the record, may I enter something for the record,
The
Mr. Chairman?
gentlelady will respond.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. By the opinion of the United States Court of International Trade, the order written by Richard Eaton, these duties must now be refunded with interest, and the clock is ticking. Further interest is accumulating
Time of the
every
gentlelady
day
has
with approximately $650 million a month.
Mr. Clyde?
Thank you. I yield.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Ambassador Greer, for testifying before us today. And again, you are right. For far too long, the United States has been taken advantage of by unfair trade practices around the world. These persistent trade imbalances have driven manufacturing overseas, weakened critical supply chains, and left our defense industrial base even more dependent on foreign suppliers. To restore both free and fair trade, President Trump has utilized tariffs on more than 60 countries, putting America first and ensuring U.S. manufacturing is no longer shortchanged by foreign competitors. Already, President Trump has delivered major results, securing billion-dollar trade deals with our allies and partners, bringing thousands of jobs back to our shores and driving billions in new manufacturing investment. Despite the Supreme Court's decision earlier this year, President Trump remains committed to reshoring American manufacturing. So my question is, President Trump has already announced historic private sector investments in American manufacturing here at home. In your view, have the administration tariff policies been successful, and have you seen significant evidence of companies reshoring investment back to the United States?
Yes, thank you. And I mentioned this earlier. Just last week, I was in Michigan and Ohio, and I went to a variety of factories from very small businesses to large multinationals. One of these is Stellantis, which is the company that owns Jeep and Dodge. And due to the president's tariffs on autos that he imposed last year, they announced a $13 billion investment in the United States across the upper Midwest. And some of that included bringing back product lines from both Canada and Mexico to the United States. So that's one example. We also announced, there was an announcement of a $60 million investment in the Whirlpool factory in Clyde, Ohio, which is the world's largest and oldest washing machine factory. And that has another 150 jobs. So these are just examples. The pharmaceutical companies, they're pouring foundations and building superstructures in North Carolina and Indiana and Southern California across the country. So and when we ask them why, they say tariffs. They don't always love to put it in their filings with the SEC, but that's why.
Well, thank you, and I've been to Clyde, Ohio, too, so great place.
Were you named after it?
No, it wasn't named after me. In your fiscal year 2027 budget request, there's an increase of $7 million, or an 8% above the fiscal year 2026 enacted level for the Office of the U.S. Trade Representative. Now, I'm a small businessman, and I believe in return on investment, so that needs to be positive and not negative, or otherwise, why are we investing? So can you explain specifically how this additional funding will translate into tangible outcomes to positive ROI? Particularly in terms of securing greater investment and expanding economic opportunities here in the United States?
Certainly. So every time we consider making a trade deal, which again, the way we get the trade deals are by having tariffs. We have to have the leverage to get the deals. Otherwise, these countries will continue to treat us as they have for decades. And so when we have some level of tariff, you bring some money into the Treasury, and that's real revenue that can be used for programs. Second, when we get the trade deals, every time we do these deals, we do an assessment of what we think the market opportunity is. And so from Indonesia to India to the UK to Argentina, it's hundreds of billions of dollars in opportunities. And as I've mentioned earlier, we've seen that actually start to happen with record-breaking exports in the last couple of months.
Okay, so but with the increase of $7 million, all right, I mean, are you going to, what is that actually doing for us in just the, how do you monitor these trade agreements to ensure that the folks are holding to what they agreed to? Or is that what this is necessary for? Or?
That's certainly part of it because
Okay.
we have to monitor it. One of the problems we've had over the past decades, my agency typically only has 200 to 250 people at any given time, and we believe that with this money we can have another 20 to 25 people. Because we have more trade agreements now after a year and more commitments, I need more people to monitor it. I need more people to enforce it. There's also there's $1 million I'm asking for, which is actually to consolidate our footprint from buildings to get rid of another lease. So I'm trying to save money for you in the long term if I
like that.
consolidate this year. So I'm trying to be as respectful as I can with the taxpayers' money and bring opportunities for American workers and farmers.
All right, one last question before my time runs out. And you addressed this with the chairman a little bit. Given our reliance on adversarial nations like Communist China for critical materials and technology, how is your office contributing to trade strategies that reduce these dependencies, especially the critical materials?
So we are right now preparing text, which we'll share with Congress before we circulate it to partners, for a plurilateral agreement on trade in critical minerals. We want to create a situation, because China has broken the market for critical minerals, and this is not the first time they've tried to use rare earths to control other countries' behavior.
Leverage.
Exactly right. And so what we are doing with trading partners who have critical minerals or who have manufacturing is we want to create an agreement where among the parties to the agreement, we have a market in critical minerals among us, and we try to trade at market-based prices. But if you're not in the agreement and you want to trade with one of these parties, you have to do it at a certain level. You have to have a price floor, because in the past, the Chinese have just dumped into our market, and then we have a mine that can't operate anymore because it doesn't make economic sense. And so we're trying to do an agreement with a select group to protect and create a market because it's been broken in the past.
Thank you, Ambassador Greer. You're doing a great job.
Thank you.
And I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman yields back. Mr. Mervan?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Ranking Member, Mr. Greer. Thank you for your testimony today. Indiana's 1st Congressional District is home to the nation's largest concentration of steel production. American steelmakers play a critical role in the defense, energy and automotive construction, and industrial manufacturing industries. Therefore, ensuring that domestic producers can compete globally on a level playing field is an economic and national security imperative. To that end, I appreciate the work that you have done to enhance Section 232 steel tariffs, and I hope to continue to work with the administration as co-chair of the Steel Caucus to strengthen our domestic steel industry. On the USMCA, one of the largest looming conversations in the steel industry is the review of the USMCA slated for this summer. While the initial adoption of the USMCA in 2020 made strides with strengthening certain rules of origin provisions that have benefited domestic steel makers, trade policies in Canada and Mexico have allowed for surge of global steel overcapacity into North America steel markets. The mandatory 6-year review of the USMCA presents an opportunity for the USTR to encourage Canada and Mexico to take actionable steps to stem the tide of non-North American steel imports that distort U.S. markets and harm American steel producers and fabricators. What conversations are you having with Canada and Mexican counterparts regarding the USMCA, and what steps do you plan in order to curb transshipment of heavy subsidized steel from other parts of the world, particularly China?
Thank you, Congressman, and we appreciate your support on this. I look forward to working with you and the rest of the Steel Caucus on something of just critical national security importance. Over the past year, I've had a lot of conversations with my counterparts in Canada and Mexico, and I've been clear with them that we cannot really have free trade with those countries in steel unless they are controlling their own borders with respect to steel, to get at the transshipment issue we're talking about. For me, the gold standard for rules of origin for steel is melt and pour, which means we want it to be melted and poured in these countries. So that's my view. That's my expectation.
When you say my view, you mean also the administration?
Yes, sir. Yep. The
Okay.
President of the United States, the Secretary of Commerce, who runs the 232. This is our view.
Because we brought in steel from another country for the White House expansion. So I just want to make sure we're on the same page.
Well, we don't prohibit imports, but we do have a tariff on them.
Okay, I just
right?
want to make sure
We're
that
not prohibiting it. But
speak consistently. So please go on.
yeah, we don't prohibit it. Like, people can still
Crystal
import.
clear.
But if it's gonna be foreign steel, it's gonna be paid for. It's a 50% tariff. It's the highest tariff any president's ever put on steel using Section 232. So I'm happy to work with you on that. I'm having conversations with the Canadians and the Mexicans about rules of origin on this issue.
Okay, thank you for that. Northwest Indiana, largest steel producer in the country, national security along 12 to 14,000 steel workers and tradesmen who are in that industry. It's the lifeblood of my economy, so it's something I take very seriously. So the next step, national security farmers. With the tariffs and what has happened to the farming industry, I represent a lot of farmers. I specifically want to ask the question that China's soybean market has been closed. That market was filled by Argentina. The administration sent $40 billion to Argentina, while the farmers are suffering here because of the tariffs and the closing of the markets. I'm a believer of E15 and making sure that we do what we can to open those markets, but also with the closing of the Strait of Hormuz, nitrates and fertilizers are increasing by 30–40% consistently, and growing season is starting now. And so the administration and you specifically have talked about lowering costs while grocery costs are rising, which is directly related to the input costs of our farmers. Please tell me what you would say to the farmers who believe that it was a slap in the face to give $40 billion to Argentina, who took over a market that was their market.
Thank you, Congressman. With respect to Argentina, again, this is something China does. Anytime we try to defend or take care of unfair trading practices, China tries to squeeze us, and they always use our farmers as a target. That's why we don't want them to be super dependent. They get it from Brazil, they get it from Argentina.
The tariffs purposely took the soybean market away from the American farmers because you don't want them to have that market?
I don't understand. What happens is when we try to take care of unfair trade practices by the Chinese, who are a national security threat, the Chinese response is often to target American farmers.
Correct.
Right? I think we agree on this. And then the Chinese start importing from Brazil or Argentina or other places. With respect to the $40 billion, that wasn't a gift. You know, you
didn't
talked
call
to
it a gift.
Secretary Beth. Well, you said you gave it to him, so you give a gift.
You're
right?
being presumptive. The United
You said that we
States
gave it to
forwarded $40 billion to Argentina. Don't put words in my mouth. I did not say gift.
The United States of America made a return on that.
Very good.
So, you know, if you don't want us to make a return on our money, we don't have to. But I
You
think
gave
it's better
them a
that we do.
return on what?
When you give a country a loan from a fund that's set up by Congress to help float countries.
So the $40 billion to Argentina was a loan?
So Congress, they control the purse, right? And you set up by statute
The executive-
funds at the Treasury Department that they can use to float countries. That's what it's for.
So
Right.
Congress or the executive gave the $40 billion, no, I'm sorry, returned $40 billion to Argentina, because we're losing track that the farmers, you didn't answer the question. The administration gave $40 billion to a country that took their market. What do you say to the farmers who feel like it's a slap in the face that one market was closed and you enhanced the country that took their market away?
We have a 25 million metric ton commitment from the Chinese every year for the next 3 years to buy soybeans. 25 million metric tons a year. That's what we have from the Chinese. That's what they committed to do. That's what we've negotiated.
Are they currently doing that?
And they don't buy it all at once. They do it over the year.
Because why would the farmers say that the market is closed if you have a commitment?
We do have a commitment.
But it's not being
they bought.
fulfilled because of the tariffs.
Well, let's talk about the data. If you look, they had a commitment from our last meetings, from the last quarter of 2025, and for the selling season, and they filled that. And we have 25 million metric tons. I'm going to see with the President of the United States, the Chinese next month. We're going to follow up on this to make sure they fulfill it.
Know that my
Time of the
farmers.
gentleman has
Yep,
expired.
I'm concluding. I thank you for the extra time.
Mr.
Thank you.
Moore?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Ambassador Greer, thank you so much for being here. In the 19th and 20th centuries, America built our industrial might on the foundation of really a protectionist trade policy, abundant energy, and union knowledge and skills. Tariffs created really the conditions for domestic production to thrive, while unions ensured that the resulting prosperity reached the workers on the factory floor. Carrying on that tradition, the administration's reindustrialization efforts for the United States through tariffs have been vital in reorienting the American economy to manufacturing. Manufacturing jobs are high-quality jobs that provide a stable lifestyle and allow families and communities to flourish. Can you explain how a robust protectionist policy coupled with unleashing American energy dominance and tapping into unique skills of American workers and unions will serve to unleash a golden age of manufacturing here in the United States?
Thank you. So starting really in earnest at the end of the Cold War, there was a view in Washington and Wall Street, I would say, that we should open our markets. We should lower our barriers to foreign goods, services, capital, and labor. And that in doing that, you know, we would grow and it would all be shared and that kind of thing. We now have, 35, 40 years of data, and we know that was wrong. We lost 5 million factory jobs. We lost 70,000 factories because people wanted to, lower all of our protections. They wanted to be dependent on countries like China. They wanted us to just go backwards in the face of unfair trade practice. They didn't want us to do anything. If we wanted to put tariffs on China, President Bush, for a hot minute, he had tariffs on steel from China, and then everyone said, no, we can't close out markets to China. We can't deal with Chinese retaliation, right? So we're not going to give up on this, right? We are committed to this. So it sometimes can be challenging. The Chinese will retaliate, but we're going to deal with this. We're not just going to lay down and let the Chinese have their way with the American economy. So we have to be able to reverse the script, and that's what we've been doing. We've been putting up tariffs to protect our manufacturing. And by the way, our ag producers, because our ag producers have had a trade deficit for the past few years under Biden, that's finally being cut down. And at the same time, we're opening foreign markets. That's why we are exporting more than America has ever exported in its entire history of 250 years. $300 billion, over $300 billion in each of January and February. So we flipped the script. Instead of having our market just wildly open and facing closed markets overseas, we've done a moderate control of our own imports to protect domestic manufacturing and agriculture. Not having tariffs on everything. We have a lot of things that aren't covered by tariffs, but things importantly are covered by tariffs. And we've opened markets overseas, and that's what's creating the turnaround for us.
Well, this has been touched on a little bit, but I just want to put a finer point on it. And I really believe that a nation that offshores its industrial capacity really offshores its deterrent capacity. And this is true both for defense industrial base, but it's also our industrial base more broadly. If we can't pour our own steel and produce the active ingredients for pharmaceuticals or making our own chips, we are at the mercy of those who do. Ambassador, can you speak a little to the national security imperative or bringing our industrial supply chain back to the United States and why that is so critical?
Well, think about the pandemic in recent history. Wasn't a war, but there were supply chain snarls and logistics challenges. And for a time, we couldn't get enough semiconductor chips that we use in cars, so we couldn't make cars. The same types of chips go into satellites and weapon systems and things like that. What about pharmaceuticals? During the pandemic, there were a lot of countries that locked down the export of pharmaceuticals. So we have fundamental advanced manufacturing and basic manufacturing like steel and other things that we have to have here. We have to, are we going to import? Of course we're going to import. It's not autarky we're talking about, but we have to have resilient supply chains where we can provide for ourselves. If there's a pandemic, if there's a war, if something else happens, we have to be able to have those resilient supply chains, not just-in-time supply chains like we like to have, but ones that actually provide for the security of the American people.
Well, thank you, Ambassador Greer, and please continue the great work. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Gentleman yields back. That concludes today's hearing. I want to thank our witness, Ambassador Greer, for being here today. Thank you, sir. Without objection, members may have 7 days to submit additional questions. For the record, subcommittee stands adjourned.